Chairman's report, still working with this, not sure I've quite got it right yet, but I had a couple of discussion points I wanted to bring up, and I'll talk to them and then take questions, I think. Regional parks was brought to my attention by the Mayor of Wairoa that regional parks finished in the Hastings district and didn't make it to Wairoa, and I thought I better go and check on that before I make any comments. So I did, and did a bit of homework, and actually there was legislation around regional parks that only included Wellington and Auckland in the early days. That was relaxed 7 or so years ago, and there is now, as it's written here, regional parks have popped up around the place, mainly in the Hastings district, I might add, because there's been some renaming. Pardon me? Yes, sure.
Does the Mayor of Wairoa consider Tūtera to be in his ruhi anywhere, and that's one question. And if not,
no.
Do you have any ideas of where you would do a regional park? Does he have any thoughts about that?
Yes.
Oh, can you enlighten us on that?
Well, I'll talk in more general terms probably, but I mean, going forward, I would be very keen to see regional parks probably go north and south, and more in Hastings. You know, financially constrained as they are to set up, and you know, we all know about that, how hard it is to set some of these things up. There is a more outdoor feel with our public now, who want to get out and do some stuff. So Mr. Adi and I have talked about one site at Mahia, actually, Mokatahi Hill, which is a QE2 trust, but the volume of foot traffic going up and down that hill now is astronomical all year round, but mainly December, January, February. And it could do with some help and some enhancement, and I think we could probably have a role in that going forward. The other one, which I haven't spoken with Mr. Adi about, and he might cringe as I say this, but as a cycle trail's developed in the forest park in Central Hawke's Bay, and if it is not going to be used for, be required for wastewater treatment, I'd like to think at some stage that may be able to be become a regional park, and we do.
I would suggest that Lake Hartuma is a tremendous development that's sitting on the table today.
Absolutely. So let's not crib our options, but I'm just signalling that sitting here, more parks, and okay, they cost money. They, you know, they're not real easy to set up, but it's just about designation and focus, really. So that's all I wanted to say on that. And the other thing was around the rail, and my main point here, Kiwi Rail have been struggling to get the resource required to help us with our discussions, as it were, but they have been constructive and helpful in this round, and I just wanted to put it out there to the public arena that we're still talking to them. We have an extension now till the end of March. The figures need to stack up. They're looking good at this stage, but just really to bring you guys up to speed with the conversation still progressing. So, Councillor Hewitt.
Oops. Thank you. So good start, and you know I've given you some feedback on this, but what I'm interested in is what's coming up that we can have input into in the next month.
Yeah, and I did have one here, which is a meeting with the iwi leaders. I'm not sure if that made it to this cut. It was all done at great speed with Di not available, but or just available that day. Yeah, nationally there's like an LGNZ round, etc. coming up, but discussion with the iwi leaders, once that's confirmed, I wouldn't mind getting some feedback on where we should be, what's important, certainly around the water space. But
so is that national, you mean?
Yeah, the iwi leaders group.
Yeah, just a question with regard to your report on rail. If Kiwi Rail currently own the tracks and they're going to provide the service, why aren't they just going to continue to own the tracks and provide the service? Why do we have to get involved at all? It seems illogical, really.
To a point. I mean, at the moment, it's about getting them to commit some resource and planning, etc., for that piece of the line, and we're basically doing the legwork, as in setting up contracts, that sort of thing. But we need to get the prices right, and that's been quite a challenge. You know, expectation of what profits might look like has been challenged by us, and the other part of it is it brings an ambition by the port into this discussion, which we can help be a conduit for that. I know what you're saying. On the face of it, just get on with it. But I think if the figures can be maintained at what we've sort of seen so far, indicatively reasonably priced, there's a deal there to be done, absolutely. So.
But the reality, Mr. Chairman, is that Kiwi Rail will not reopen the service on their own at this point in time.
Correct. Councillor Belford.
Can you talk a bit about the intersectoral forum and what's the draft regional plan referred to there? I gather there's some evolution of the governance and the operations of the intersector group.
Yeah, we had a meeting on Monday, as it says there, with the mayors and others, and I'm happy to, basically the elected members of the region, so that includes MPs, it includes DHB, Nahiwi was there, Nikki was there, and the mayors and myself. And we just, these things are big, you know, these groups are big and they can become unwieldy, and the moot there was to try and focus some of the governance back into let's, you know, partner with some of these good things that are happening and get some outcomes going. So that was the discussion on the day. Yeah.
So what is the draft regional plan? Is that the REDS thing, or is that something?
Well, REDS is part of it, but things such as driver licence, you know, the work that's been done on the driver licence as an example, you know, we're through the Transport Committee now working towards getting some funding for some of our less fortunate areas of the region that need some help for youngsters to get licences. That's going really well. This group is driving, you know, projects like that. Further questions? Someone happy to move? I will move. Thank you. And I've spoken enough. Do you wish to speak? Okay, I'll put that motion, then all those in favour please say aye. Contrary no. Minor item, which is water forum.
Yes, just to inform fellow councillors, I attended a 2-day water forum that was held in Wellington yesterday and Monday. Probably key points of discussion were there was some discussion on that next steps document, which had only come out the previous weekend, so people were having a bit of a stab at what the implications of it were. Alistair Bisley was one of the speakers, and he, I think, probably overall expressed some satisfaction that a lot of the recommendations that have been made over the 4 reports that Land and Water Forum have produced have been incorporated in one way or another. They've been knocked around a bit, I suppose, with the document, but I think probably overall there was some expression of satisfaction that they are being listened to. I guess that was the first message for me. The second one was probably around this whole business of collaborative processes, and a lot of councils are now embarking upon them, and almost every speaker probably talked about collaborative processes. Unfortunately, nobody's gone around and interviewed them to try and correlate the learnings that might help us. But one or two things that did come up were a farmer got up who is part of a collaborative process in the South Island, and he said in the previous 6 months he'd attended 26 meetings. So our one here, which is huge in terms of the number, it's easily the largest with 35 stakeholders, and probably meets the least frequently. I think we've been meeting something like 3 monthly. That's very clearly not intensive enough to get the process moving forward, and because it's such a long-winded and stretched out process with the regularity of the meetings, it means that there's been a churn of people at our stakeholder meetings. That's a problem, and it can to some extent be avoided if we meet more regularly. And a lot of the meetings, it seems to me, the ones I've attended, we go back and refresh ourselves because it's 3 months since we talked about it, and that's to be avoided as well. So a take home for you, James, I think, which you may well be aware of, is that I think there needs to be some intensification of the meeting process, and people just need to commit to get on with it. So there will be a number of papers that will be available from that forum. They're going to circulate us with the, I think, probably the Dropbox or whatever, and probably what I should do is make sure that you guys have got access to those papers once they're available. So I don't know if there are any questions.
No, well done. Thank you. We'll move on now. Our final item in the information performance monitoring, verbal update on CHP wastewater consents monitoring compliance.
Thank you, Chair. So just thought I'd give you a bit of an update. There's been sort of recent media commentary around what's going on down at Central Hawke's Bay, and I thought it would be useful to give you an update. I'll attempt to answer any questions that I can, but I would just point out, as you'll hear shortly, that we're kind of at a bit of a sensitive stage in the process, and there may be some things I can't actually talk to you about today. Just recapping by way of background, that last year we served abatement notices on the District Council requiring them to take some immediate steps to address the poor performance of their plants at Waipukurau and Waipawa. And as a result of that, Central Hawke's Bay District got some advice on what their options were and how that should be dealt with. That resulted in some changes to the way the plant operated, the most substantive being the the commissioning or the building or retrofitting of a second-hand and building of new lamella clarifiers, which are a separator effectively for removing flocculated material out of the waste stream that was forming during the phosphorus dosing process, and reducing not only the efficiency of the phosphorus dosing but also reducing the efficiency of their sand filtration and their subsequent UV treatment process. So they fitted those clarifiers last year in May at Waipawa, in July and Waipukurau. Since then, both plants have continued to have substandard discharges or standard of discharge. There's an ongoing issue for both plants around the levels of ammonia in the discharge, and Central Hawke's Bay District Council have come to us and sought a change of conditions to allow the level of discharge to fit within a new condition, and we're working through that with them at the moment. So we haven't concluded that yet. It's still going through technical assessments to look at the effects of an increased level of ammonia in the discharge. But more recently there have been issues or ongoing issues with phosphorus levels and E. coli. So we have sought advice to clarify when we might consider we should be assessing compliance with these conditions, given that they have an annual cycle of monitoring and some exceedances that they are allowed to have in the wastewater, but only a limited number of them over a 12-month basis. So effectively they can have the odd poor level of discharge under the current conditions, but not an unlimited number, and that's considered over a 12-month period. The question for us was really, when should we consider the 12-month starts? When does the clock start, if you like? And the advice to us is that should be post the introduction of the clarifiers and the improvements to the plants, i.e. in fairness and natural justice principles, they've been given the chance to make the improvements, consider compliance against the date at which the improvements have been made. So as of today, if we consider that being the starting point, as of today, the Waipukurau plant is at the limits of its allowed exceedances for both phosphorus and E. coli. So if after look, the commissioning date was July, what did I say, July last year. So effectively they've reached their exceedances. If they have another exceedance, they are non-complying with the conditions. and the Waipawa plant is 2 exceedances away. Now, given the frequency of sampling, which is every 2 weeks, and then the subsequent processing of the sample information and provision of that to us, we're envisaging that towards the end of this week and early next week we'll have the most recent results for both plants, and so we'll be able to at that point consider whether they're, well, certainly Waipukurau is non-complying and how close Waipawa is from non-complying if it's had further exceedances. And what we'll do at that point is look at those results and then take some advice as to what our next options are, which may include a formal prosecution through the Environment Court.
What can we say to that? I mean, this has been the preeminent water pollution issue for the last 10 years.
Hang on. While that may be correct, and you're entitled to your view, Councillor Belford, he's just explained that there is a process it has to go through.
Yeah, there's a process, and the 2 preceding chairmen of this council presided over a meeting in 2006 in Havelock North where there were 200 irate people about these very issues. He explained to the
councillor. We're not talking about 2006 and today. There's a whole different process that has happened
we're
now.
talking about what the public perception is of this council's ability.
Have you got any questions of Mr. Maxwell?
I have tons of questions for Mr. Maxwell. How long do you want this meeting to go on? Yeah.
I suspect he can't answer that many of them, considering the pending P word that we got at the end of that report.
Well, that's probably the case, and but the perception that we are now a year into the new consent, or virtually a year into the new consenting process, and discovering, lo and behold, that the scheme that has been put forward isn't working, will not be as a surprise to most of the informed observers of this process over the last 10 years. So but we're slowly discovering this, apparently.
No, we're not. That's order there. Stop you right there. Any real questions? Councillor Bevan.
Are we at the point with the level of non-compliance that we need to be reconsidering the use of those 2 pieces of land that we've bought down there and not be turning them into bike parks?
So, just partially responding to Councillor Belford, but also that question as well, is that you have to understand that the regional council is not in a position to dictate the type of treatment and how it should be, whether they chose a wetland system or discharge to land. As you're aware, this council was looking to facilitate them into a land discharge option, which they ultimately chose not to pursue in favour of this floating wetland option. So the first point is that they have to meet the conditions of the consent. It's not negotiable. I understand and I get the frustration around ultimately delivering that, but as a good local government bureaucrat, there is a process we have to follow, and particularly if we get to the point where we are considering prosecution, we don't want to jeopardise our opportunity of success in that by taking shortcuts in the process. So that's the first point. The second point is that it may well be that in the very near future, Central Hawke's Bay needs to consider its options around its treatment of wastewater, including whether those plants are adequate, they're doing the job, whether they're sufficiently scaled and sized to do the job, and whether they're going to need to look at alternative options. Because from a staff perspective, I reiterate that achieving the consent conditions are not negotiable. We're going through a consent condition review process with them at the moment to reflect Plan Change 6 requirements, but also some of the issues and concerns that have been raised by members of the public and ones that we've been fully aware of ourselves that we're looking to tidy up. So the environment that they're going to operate in to achieve a discharge into is getting increasingly tougher, and my view is that in the future it will get tougher still. So they need to think about what their options may be in the short and long term, but that sits firmly in their lap. It's not for us to tell them.
Do you think that the public perception that local governments, put an S on that, local governments, regional governments, have been unable to get a grip on this issue over an extended period of time will cause doubts as to how effectively we can monitor the environmental requirements, mitigation requirements, et cetera, of a regional water storage scheme on the Tuki-Tuki?
Perhaps I'll have a go at answering that. First of all, who knows what public perception will get us, where it will get us. But secondly, I mean, I think, you know, again, I come back, it's a similar discussion that we had earlier to the Waihi Dam. In these instances, the council, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, is the regulator, and we are required, like it or not, to follow some very clearly spelt out legal processes as well as good practice under legislation and under case law. So we're very careful to try and follow that to avoid tripping ourselves up and potentially negating the process that we're trying to address. But I think that, again, you know, we come back to who's the applicant here and what are they doing what have they done, if anything. Again, a question of either action or inaction by them. They're also aware of the framework that's been set and what's required. They have convinced themselves, or they genuinely believe, that there's a different way of achieving that. And we have to respect that they have their own right to be able to do that, as any consent holder does, not just Eastern Group, not just Central Hawke's Bay District Council. All 4,400 resource consent holders in Hawke's Bay have the ability to manage their consent as they best see fit to address the consent conditions. The challenge that we have is when those consent conditions are not met, then we then have to follow due process. And I accept in both cases and in a number of others that there is public frustration at the perceived lack of pace, but that is how it is.
Chair, I have a question, but I absolutely agree with what Liz has said there. What is really annoying here is that we put up, our science team put up a proposal to manage their sewage situation, and they rejected it. And I've been hugely frustrated. It cost us a lot of money that they rejected it, because we made a capital investment and then we've revalued it and it's $900,000 cost to us. And we may have been part of the process problem there, challenges there anyway, but they ignored us. And they've gone ahead, and they have a right to do that. What I want to know is the councillors who are managing the governance of this, what is their responsibility and what is their liability? Exactly the same as Eastland Group. It's about time that these directors or these councillors just didn't turn up for meetings and tick boxes. They are liable for this, and I want to know from you, can we take these guys to task? The councillors who supported the change of decision, ignored our advice and are polluting the Toki.
So I don't believe we can take councillors to task on it. We certainly take the council as an entity or an agency to task on it, and when the time comes and if the evidence allows, we will. It's probably slightly different to a commercial body like Eastland Group, where our view at this point is that the directors may well be liable if we chose action against the company. So there are, you know, it's kind of a different situation. Without having the Local Government Act in front of me, I don't believe that liability can sit with individual councillors.
So, just going back to what you said before, Liz, which was a discussion around us following due process, and I understand that. I'm a lawyer by training, so I understand that. But the problem is we've got paralysis through process here, and we've got it times two, because we've got it up at Wairua and we've got it down at Central Hawke's Bay, and the public are pretty upset about this, and understandably so. And it's almost like our hands are tied behind our backs and we can't do anything about it, and it's really frustrating. And and all I can do, Ian, is urge you to pursue this, because there's clearly a will on the part of both this council and the public for us to do so.
Okay, final questions. Let's wrap this up. Someone happy to move we accept that report?
Did he hear anything?
Heard the word report. Seconder, thank you. Further discussion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. And I will move into public excluded and then break for lunch. So someone happy to pages 53 through 57. I don't know why that is for 3 pages, but there you go. Someone happy to move, and that and directors of, and CE of HBRC attend RWS's private funding. You're happy to move that? Thank you. We have a seconder for that over here. Thank you, Councillor Dick. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. We'll break for lunch, ladies and gentlemen. Be back here by 15:15, hopefully. Yes.